Have you ever had that moment where you're watching your favorite English show,
Yeah.
no subtitles needed, you're totally following along, but then someone asks you a question?
And it's like
Yeah, and it's like your brain just
the
freezes.
deer in the headlights.
Total deer the headlights.
You understand
You
everything,
get it.
but to speak,
To speak,
it feels impossible.
it feels impossible. And, you know, this is like a really common thing.
It is.
And that's what we're going to be exploring today
yes.
in this deep dive.
It's a fascinating topic.
Yeah, it is.
It really is.
So we're going to be looking at this idea of like, why is it that so many people can understand English really well,
Right.
but they can't speak it fluently?
Yeah. And that's the big question.
And we've got this great material
Yes.
that we've been going through.
From a YouTube English learning podcast.
Yeah, really interesting one.
Lots of good stuff in there.
Yeah, some really good nuggets.
Yeah.
So we're going to try to pull out
the best tips.
Yeah, exactly.
For our listeners today.
Exactly. And really like kind of break it down so that by the end,
So they can start speaking.
yeah, you're going to be able to go from understanding to actually being able to speak.
That's the goal.
Yes,
Be
more
able to-
confidently and more naturally.
The goal is to be able to communicate with other people.
Yeah,
And to feel confident doing that.
to feel good doing it,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So I think maybe a good place to start would be with like what is often the biggest hurdle,
Right.
and that is the fear.
Yes.
The fear of making mistakes,
Absolutely.
which I think everybody can relate to.
Oh, yeah. The fear of making a mistake, of saying something incorrectly,
Yeah.
stumbling over your words,
Yeah, mispronouncing things.
mispronouncing things, using the wrong grammar.
Yeah.
And a lot of times this leads to people just avoiding speaking at all.
Right, just not even trying.
Yeah, because it feels safer
It feels easier.
than potentially making a mistake
Yeah.
and feeling embarrassed or stupid.
And, you know, it's understandable.
It is.
But it's kind of interesting
It
if
is.
you think about it.
Yeah.
Because if you think about how kids learn language,
Oh, yeah.
like little kids when they're first learning to talk,
It's all mistakes.
it's all
You
mistakes.
can mispronounce everything.
They get the grammar all wrong.
Their grammar's all over the place.
But that's how they learn.
But that's how they learn, right? They
Yeah.
don't wait until they have perfect grammar
Right.
to start speaking.
They just go for it.
Yeah, they just start babbling
Well,
and
thanks.
experiment.
And they get it wrong and somebody corrects them.
Right. And their brains are actually wired to learn from those mistakes.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So when they make a mistake,
That's how they,
their brain gets this feedback
yeah,
and it helps them adjust and learn the correct way to say
they
things.
don't feel.
And it's important to remember
Yeah.
that native English speakers often don't even notice
Oh, this is interesting.
those little grammar mistakes. Yeah.
Yeah.
That you're agonizing over.
Yeah, you're worried about getting the tense wrong.
The preposition, whatever.
Yeah, they don't even notice.
You're not even paying attention to that.
That's great.
Yeah, they're focused on understanding your message.
Right.
What are you trying to say?
What are you trying to communicate?
Yeah.
So
That's the most important thing.
that's really encouraging.
It is.
It is. I like that.
So don't worry so much about being perfect.
Yeah.
Just try to get your meaning across,
Yeah.
and you'll be surprised
Yeah.
how well people understand you.
Okay, so we've talked about the fear of making mistakes,
Right?
but what are some other reasons
Yeah.
why people who can understand English really well still struggle to speak it?
Well, one of the biggest reasons is simply lack of practice.
Okay.
A lot of people spend most of their time,
Doing other things.
doing passive activities like listening to podcasts,
Yeah.
watching movies, reading books.
Right?
And while those are great for improving your vocabulary
Yeah.
and your comprehension,
Yeah.
they don't actually help you practice speaking
Right. It's that thing of you can watch a cooking show all day long,
all day long.
but until you get in the kitchen,
You're not going to be able to cook.
you're not going to be able to cook.
Yeah.
Same with swimming. You can watch Olympic swimmers,
Right.
but until you get in the water,
You're not going to be able to swim.
you're not going to be able to swim.
Right.
So it's like speaking is an active skill
Yeah.
that you need to practice.
You need to use your muscles.
You need to use your mouth.
Yeah. Your tongue, your vocal cords,
You got to get those things working.
everything.
Right. And I think another thing that gets in the way
Yes.
that I know I've experienced is this like overthinking grammar.
Oh, yeah.
Like you're trying to speak and you're like,
I'm trying to remember
yeah.
what's the past participle of this verb.
Yeah. You're like, wait.
And is this a preposition or a conjunction?
Yeah. And then the moment's gone.
Yeah, you've missed your chance to speak.
Totally. And then you feel like, oh,
And then you get frustrated.
frustrated, and you don't want to speak again.
Right.
So it's like this vicious cycle. And
Yeah.
and the material that we were looking at.
They suggest
Yeah.
just getting the message out there.
Yeah. Just say it.
Don't worry so much about being perfect.
Yeah.
Just try to communicate,
Yeah.
and then you can work on the grammar later.
Right. It's like, don't let perfection be the enemy of good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Done is better than perfect.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then another factor that I thought was really interesting that they brought up was the role of environment.
Yes.
Like the environment that you're in can really
Impact your ability to learn to speak.
impact it. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're living in a place where,
Or nobody speaks English.
where English isn't spoken regularly,
Yeah.
you're going to have fewer opportunities
Yeah.
to practice.
Right. So if you're living in a place where English is everywhere,
You're going to pick it up.
yeah, you're just going to absorb it.
Yeah.
But the good news is you can create your own environment.
You can.
We'll talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
So, yeah, the
But
environment.
to kind of sum up the things we've talked about so far.
Yeah, we've got the fear
We're-
of making mistakes.
Right.
We've got lack of practice.
Yeah.
We've got overthinking grammar.
Yeah,
And then we've got the environment.
right.
So those are kind of the four main things.
Those are the big ones.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to that first one.
Okay.
The fear.
The fear.
The fear of making mistakes.
Yeah. How do we get over that?
How do we get over it? Because it's so real.
It is.
And I think, we were talking about, where does that fear come from?
Yeah, it comes from a
Like
lot.
fear of being judged,
Yeah.
right?
You don't want to sound stupid.
Yeah, you don't want people to think you're not intelligent
Right.
because you're making mistakes in English.
Or that you're not taking it seriously.
Right.
Right.
But it's important to remember that mistakes are a natural part of the learning process. Everybody makes mistakes,
Even native speakers.
especially when you're learning something new.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to make mistakes.
So it's really about reframing that.
Yeah, reframe it.
Instead of like, oh, this is bad, I made a mistake.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is an opportunity to learn.
This is how I'm going to get better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
So embrace the mistakes.
Embrace the mistakes.
Yeah.
So what are some things that people can do
Yeah.
to kind of like,
Start small.
yeah, start small? What are some like baby steps?
Yeah, baby steps.
Yeah.
So don't try to have a big, long conversation right away.
Right.
Just start with a few sentences.
Okay.
Maybe even just one sentence.
Okay.
Practice that.
Yeah.
Get it right.
Yeah.
And then move on to the next one.
And the material we were looking at suggested like practicing by yourself.
Yes.
Like stand in front of the mirror
Talk to yourself.
and talk to yourself in English.
Yeah.
Like maybe about your day or something.
Yeah.
Or describe.
And they also said you could record yourself,
Oh, yeah.
which can feel a little scary.
It can be a little intimidating,
Yeah.
but it's a really good way
To kind of hear yourself.
to hear yourself and to identify areas where you need to improve.
Right. Like maybe you're,
Maybe pronunciation isn't clear,
yeah. Or you're hesitating a lot.
or you're using the wrong grammar
Yeah.
and you don't even realize it until
Okay.
you hear yourself.
Right. And I think the material also really emphasized this idea of being patient with yourself.
Yes.
Like it takes time
You
to
know,
learn a language.
it's a journey,
It's a journey.
not a destination.
Yeah. So don't get discouraged
Don't give up.
if you don't sound perfect right away.
Yeah.
And they actually said that the more mistakes you make,
Yeah.
the faster you're going to learn.
The faster you'll improve.
Which is kind of counterintuitive,
It is.
but it makes sense
It does.
if you think about it. Because each mistake is a learning opportunity.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about this idea of passive versus active learning.
Okay.
What's the difference?
So passive learning is when you're just absorbing information,
Right.
like listening to a podcast,
Right.
watching a movie, reading a book.
Okay,
You're not actively producing language.
so it's input.
Yeah, it's input.
Okay.
Active learning is when you're actually speaking,
Okay,
writing, using the language.
so it's output.
Yeah, it's output.
Okay.
And the problem is
Yeah,
that a lot of people spend way too much time on passive learning
right.
and not enough time on active learning.
And I think they said it was something like
Like 90%.
90% passive,
It's not-
10% active.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is not a good balance
Right.
if you want to learn to speak.
Right, and it's like, I remember them saying something like,
People remember
yeah, like, you remember way more
90%
of what you actively do
of what you do.
than what you passively.
Take in.
You've got to get active.
You got to get active.
Yeah.
So what are some ways that people can start to shift that balance?
Well, they talked about this technique called shadowing,
Okay.
which is where you listen to a native speaker
Yo.
and you repeat what they say.
Okay.
So you're basically shadowing their speech.
So like a sentence?
Yeah, a sentence, a phrase,
Okay.
a short segment from a podcast,
Okay.
anything like that.
And you try to copy their pronunciation?
Yeah, their intonation, their rhythm, so that you're
So you're basically mimicking.
mimicking them.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And that helps you to improve your pronunciation
Okay.
and your fluency.
Okay. What else?
Another technique is to think in English.
Okay.
So instead of thinking in your native language
Right.
and then translating,
Yeah.
try to think directly in English.
So like how would you do that? Like,
So for example,
yeah.
if you're making coffee in the morning,
Yeah.
don't think about it in your native language.
Right.
Think about it in English. Like, I am grinding the beans.
Yeah, I'm grinding the beans. I'm pouring the water.
Yeah, I'm putting the filter in.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that.
And another thing is to speak out loud every day,
Okay,
even if you're by yourself.
talk to yourself.
Yeah, talk to yourself.
Sing in the shower in English.
Yeah, anything to get your mouth moving
Okay.
and your brain working in English.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's all about like making that shift from passive
Yeah.
to active.
Active.
Get active. Okay, so we know we need to speak more,
Right.
but what about the environment?
Yeah.
Like we were talking about before,
If you're not living,
if you're not living in an English-speaking country,
yeah, how do you create that
yeah, how do you create that environment?
English-speaking environment?
Yeah.
What are some ideas?
One of the easiest things is to change the language
Oh.
on your phone and your computer
Yeah.
to English
Okay.
so that you're constantly seeing English.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What else? You can also listen to English music
Yeah.
and podcasts
Yeah.
and audiobooks
Yeah.
in the background while you're doing other things.
Like while you're cooking,
Yeah, while you're cleaning.
cleaning.
Yeah, driving.
Yeah, so that it becomes part of your,
Yeah, part of your daily life.
yeah, what else?
You can also talk to yourself in English,
Yeah, we talked about that.
which I know sounds a little crazy,
A little crazy, but it works.
but it works.
Yeah.
And if you want to interact with other English speakers,
Yeah.
there are lots of online communities
Oh, yeah.
and language exchange apps
Yeah.
where you can find people
Yeah.
to practice with.
So many resources out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so even if you're not
Living in an English-speaking country.
in an English-speaking country,
You can still
you can create your own
create your own environment.
little English bubble.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so
So now that we've talked about the environment,
we've talked about the environment. We've
Right.
talked about the reasons why people struggle.
what are some specific techniques?
Let's get to the techniques.
Yeah, let's give them some tools.
Yeah, some tools to actually improve.
Yeah.
So one of the things that they talked about that we've mentioned already is shadowing.
Right.
So we talk about what it is, but can you talk about why it's so effective?
Yeah, so shadowing is really good for pronunciation
Okay.
because you're mimicking a native speaker.
Right.
You're trying to copy their sounds
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
And it's also good for fluency because
Yeah.
you're getting used to the rhythm and the flow of English.
Right.
And it's also good for confidence.
Right.
Because you're actually speaking.
Yeah.
You're getting your mouth moving.
You're making the sounds.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that.
And you can use shadowing with all sorts of materials.
Oh, cool.
You can use it with podcasts.
Yeah.
You can use it with TV shows.
Yeah.
You can even use it with music.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So it's a very versatile technique.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
What else?
Another technique is thinking in English,
Right.
which we talked about before.
Yeah.
But it's worth repeating.
Yeah.
Because it's so important.
Why is it so important?
Because it helps you to bypass.
That translation.
Yeah, the translation step.
So you're not like thinking in your native language and then going,
Yeah, you're not switching back and forth.
Yeah.
You're thinking directly in English,
which makes you faster.
which makes you faster and more fluent.
Right.
And they gave some good examples.
So like what kind of examples?
It's like if you're getting dressed in the morning,
Okay.
think about what you're doing in English.
Like I'm putting on my socks.
Yeah, I'm putting on my shirt.
I'm buttoning my shirt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or if you're walking down the street, describe what you see in English.
Like the sky's blue.
Yeah, the buildings are tall.
Okay. I like that.
So it's just about getting in the habit of
Yeah.
thinking in English.
Okay. What else?
Another good technique is storytelling.
Okay.
So tell yourself stories in English.
So like what kind of stories?
It could be personal stories
Okay.
about your life, or it could be
Yeah.
made up stories.
Oh, fun.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the benefit of storytelling
Yeah.
is that it forces you to use a variety of grammar
Right,
and
right.
vocabulary.
Right. And full sentences.
Full sentence.
Not just like one word answers.
Yeah.
Okay. What else?
Another technique is recording yourself,
Right.
which we talked about before,
Yeah.
but it's a really good way,
To see how you're doing.
to track your progress
Yeah.
and identify areas where you need to improve.
Okay.
Yeah.
What else?
Another good technique is to ask and answer questions.
Okay.
So basically have a conversation with yourself.
Oh, okay. So like,
Yeah. So think about common questions
okay.
that people might ask you. Like,
Yeah.
what do you do for work?
Yeah.
What are your hobbies?
Right.
What's your favorite food?
Yeah.
And then practice answering those questions
Aloud.
out loud in English.
Okay. I like that.
So you're basically preparing yourself for
Right.
real conversations.
What else?
And finally, the most important thing is to practice every day,
Okay.
even if it's just for 5 minutes.
5 minutes a day.
Yeah,
That's doable.
it is.
Yeah.
So make it a habit
Yeah.
to speak English every day.
Okay. So we've got all these great techniques,
We do.
but the material also talked about this idea of mindset.
Right.
Like your mindset is just as important
Yeah.
as the techniques themselves.
Yeah, your attitude,
Yeah.
your beliefs about yourself.
Well, one of the biggest ones
Yeah.
is to accept that you're going to make mistakes.
Right, we talked about that.
We did.
But it's worth repeating.
It is.
Yeah.
Because it's so important.
Yeah.
Don't let the fear of making mistakes,
Paralyze you.
yeah, hold you back.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and what was that thing that they said about, like, changing your self-talk?
Yeah. So instead of saying things like,
You know, I'm so bad at English,
Yeah.
I'll never be able to speak fluently.
right.
Try saying things like,
Yeah.
I'm making progress every day. I'm getting better and better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
So be positive.
Be positive.
Encourage yourself.
Encourage yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they also talked about starting small,
Yes.
like we talked about with the techniques.
Yeah.
But it applies to mindset too.
Yeah.
Like, don't try to do too much too soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just set small goals.
Yeah.
And celebrate your successes.
Yeah.
Yeah. What else? Another good tip is to slow down
Oh,
when you're speaking.
yeah.
A lot of people think that speaking quickly,
Means you're fluent,
yeah, equals fluency.
but it's not true.
No.
It's more important to be clear
Yeah.
and understandable
Absolutely.
than to be fast.
Yeah.
So slow down,
Yeah.
enunciate,
Yeah.
make sure people can understand you.
And that will actually help you to sound more fluent.
Okay. And what about that idea of surrounding yourself with English?
Yes.
Like we talked about creating the environment.
Create that English bubble.
Yeah.
Surround yourself with the language.
As much as possible.
Yeah. Listen to English music.
Yeah.
Watch English TV shows.
Yeah.
Read English books.
Talk to English speakers.
Yeah. Anything you can do
Yeah.
to immerse yourself in the language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's really a combination
Yeah.
of the right techniques
Techniques.
and the right mindset
And mindset.
that's going to lead to fluency.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
What would you say is the most important thing
The most important thing
for people to remember?
is that speaking is a skill
Okay,
that you need to practice.
right.
It's not enough to just know the rules. You have to actually use the language.
Use it.
Yeah.
So don't wait.
Don't wait.
So start speaking.
Start today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Embrace the mistakes.
Embrace those mistakes.
Yeah.
Because that's how you're going to learn.
That's how you get better.
Yeah, and create that English environment.
Surround yourself with English.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're listening to this and you're thinking like, okay, I want to get better at speaking,
What's one thing
what's the one
we
thing
could do today?
that you can do today to
Just
start?
start practicing.
Yeah.
What's your action step?
What's your action step?
Yeah.
Awesome.
So think about that
Think about it and do it.
and do it.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much
Thank you.
for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
And we'll see you next time.